Cadia does not sleep. Even in moments of calm, the planet remains vigilant. A world forged into a weapon, its people raised beneath skies permanently scarred by the distant glow of the Eye of Terror. Here, children learn the sound of artillery before lullabies. Here, every horizon is measured not by beauty, but by threat. In the final months before the 13th Black Crusade reached full fury, Cadia felt different. The century augurs whispered of disturbances too subtle to quantify. Astropathic choirs reported echoes in the warp. Not screams, not yet, but pressure. Like the air before a storm so vast it could swallow stars. This was not the beginning of war. This was the moment before it became inevitable across the Cadian Gate. Within the immaterial madness of the Eye of Terror, fleets began to move. They did not surge forward in reckless fury. Abaddon the Despoiler had learned patience across 10,000 years of failure and survival. The Black Legion assembled in silence, warships drifting like predatory beasts, their hulls carved with blasphemous scripture and layered in millennia of hatred. For the Imperium, this silence was the most terrifying omen of all. In the Segmentum Obscurus, Imperial commanders received fragmented reports. Chaos warbands abandoning lesser raids, traitor fleets vanishing from known routes, cult activity escalating on worlds once considered secure. The pattern was clear to those willing to see it. Cadia was being encircled, not by ships alone, but by destiny. On the surface, Cadian cities continued their routines with disciplined precision. Khazars drilled. Armor columns rolled through ash-choked roads. Millennium clerks counted ammunition with religious reverence. Among them was Sergeant Alaric, veteran of a dozen border engagements, his face permanently etched with the dust of battlefields that never truly healed. He had felt the change long before the alarm sounded. Veterans always did. The wind carried unfamiliar echoes. Vox traffic contained pauses that should not exist. And in quiet moments, when the night fires burned low, even hardened soldiers felt as though something immense was watching from beyond the stars. Cadia had repelled 12 Black Crusades, but this one felt personal. Deep within the fortress citadels, Lord Castellan Ursarkar stood before star charts illuminated by ghostly hololithic light. Each symbol represented a possible death, a breached gateway, a fallen Khazar, a system lost to madness. He knew the truth few dared to speak aloud. If Cadia fell, the Eye of Terror would bleed into the Imperium like an open wound. The segmentum would fracture. Entire sectors would burn. Cadia was not merely a fortress world. It was a lock on the galaxy's most dangerous door. Kale ordered reinforcements, tightened patrols, and authorized protocols older than some Imperial saints. And yet, even as defenses grew stronger, he understood the bitter paradox of Cadia. It had been designed to hold forever, not to survive the moment it finally failed. In the void above, Imperial fleets took formation. Battle barges aligned their prows toward the darkness. The Cadian Gate loomed ahead, a narrow passage through hell itself. Astropaths began to bleed from the eyes. The warp screamed. And somewhere within the Eye of Terror, Abaddon watched Cadia not as a fortress, but as a promise long overdue. The storm was no longer approaching. It was already here. The calm shattered like glass under a hammer. Dawn broke over the plains of Cadia, but the light revealed nothing of serenity. Smoke twisted over scorched earth, artillery craters gouged the landscape, and the distant thunder of warp engines resonated like a heartbeat from the void. Across the gateways, sensors flared. Unidentified vessels emerging from shadows, fleets moving with impossible coordination. This was no mere raid. This was war on a scale the Imperium had not seen in centuries. Abaddon had not come to Cadia for glory. His assault was surgical. Strike teams of the Black Legion fell upon border sectors simultaneously. Warp rifts erupted, spewing demonic entities into the northern plains. Entire regiments of Imperial Guard were wiped out before they could form defensive lines. Sergeant Alaric's unit, stationed near the atrium of Parmenio, was among the first to encounter the invaders. Bolters rattled, chains word screamed, and the air was thick with the scent of ozone and blood. Every soldier knew that hesitation meant annihilation, yet even Alaric could not comprehend the scale of destruction. Chaos Space Marines moved with terrifying efficiency, their armor etched with runes of despair. They struck not just to kill, but to break the spirit. Warp storms distorted the battlefield, sending artillery fire off course and creating pockets where reality itself seemed to fray. Across the gateways, fortresses that had stood for millennia trembled under the Black Crusade. Cadia units attempted counterattacks, disciplined and precise, yet the numbers and firepower of the invaders were overwhelming. Explosions tore walls apart, and the cries of the wounded echoed across the plains. Yet the defenders did not falter entirely. Alaric organized small squads to hold critical choke points, buying precious minutes for retreating civilians and wounded soldiers. Each action, each bolt fired, was a defiance, a statement that Cadia would not fall without blood being shed. Even in these first hours, the scale of sacrifice became clear. Cadia's defenders would fight, not for survival alone, but for honor, duty, and the legacy of a world that had resisted chaos longer than almost any other. As the first day progressed, the Black Legion revealed the depth of its strategy. Multiple breaches across the northern and eastern gateways drew defenders away from key positions, forcing them to stretch thin. Sorcerers of chaos conjured psychic storms that disoriented artillery crews and caused loyalist ranks to stumble. The warp itself seemed alive, a malevolent consciousness pushing Cadia's soldiers toward exhaustion. Kale in the central citadel directed reinforcements with the precision of a surgeon, but Eva's authority could not bend the tide entirely. The planet was bleeding. Every fortress that fell became a warning. Every breach widened the path for the coming devastation. Cadia was no longer preparing for war. It was already fighting for survival. Even amid devastation, courage flourished. Alaric personally led a counter-assault to repel a squad of Chaos Marines that had broken through a sector of the atrium. Bolters fired with surgical precision. Grenades exploded, and chains words clashed against demon-forged armor. Each maneuver was calculated. Each decision carried the weight of life and death. Nearby, medics risked everything to retrieve the wounded, and squads of Cadia held corridors against overwhelming numbers. These acts of heroism, small in scale but immense in consequence, demonstrated the indomitable human spirit, a light burning defiantly against encroaching darkness. By the evening, the first wave of the Black Crusade had left Cadia scarred and staggering, yet not broken. The gateways still held in places, fortresses still stood, and surviving regiments regrouped. The defenders understood the truth. The initial assault was only the beginning. From the eye of terror, Abaddon observed. His forces had tested Cadia's might, shattered its outer defenses, and demonstrated the inevitability of chaos. The first blows had been dealt, and they were only the opening act in a war that would consume the world. Night fell across Cadia, but offered no respite. The once orderly plains were now a landscape of fire and shadow. Craters smoldered with molten rock, while the eerie glow of warp energy twisted the horizon. Every sound, a distant explosion, a bolt fired, the roar of demons, reminded the defenders that Cadia was no longer a home. It was a battlefield that demanded every ounce of courage. Abaddon's strategy unfolded like a predator circling its prey. With the initial shock of the first wave behind them, Black Legion forces began to coordinate with terrifying precision. Tactical squads penetrated previously secure sectors, while demon hosts erupted from warp rifts, sowing chaos and disarray. The defenders found themselves fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. Cadia units, usually the pinnacle of disciplined warfare, were stretched thin, Fortresses that had withstood centuries of assaults now trembled under sustained bombardment. Amid the chaos, Sergeant Alaric received orders to lead a squad to reinforce a sector near the ruined atrium. Each step was a calculated risk. One wrong move could lead to annihilation. Warp storms churn above the plains, their energy distorting reality. Lightning-like streaks of psychic fire struck random points across the battlefield, detonating ammunition caches and leveling defensive positions. Imperial psychers, trained and disciplined, screamed as they attempted to shield soldiers from the worst of these storms. In the midst of one such storm, Alaric's squad witnessed a demonic entity Terra through a squad of Cadians before their eyes. Its very presence bent reality. Shadows twisted and whispered, and some soldiers fled in terror. Those who stayed fought not because they expected to win, but because leaving their comrades to die was unthinkable. Lord Castellan Ursarkar's command room was a hub of unending activity. Hololithic maps flicker with red indicators, breaches, heavy casualties, and sectors at risk of total loss. Reinforcements were limited. Orders had to be precise. He understood the moral weight of each decision. Sending soldiers into sectors already overwhelmed was a death sentence, yet failing to act would allow chaos to exploit the gaps. It was a cruel calculus of survival, one where every option cost lives. Even as the Black Legion advanced, Cadia's defenders managed moments of heroism that shone like sparks in darkness. A platoon led by a junior officer held a ruined citadel gate long enough for hundreds of civilians to escape. Grenades, bolter fire, and desperate melee delayed chaos forces, though they were eventually overwhelmed. Alaric personally led a countercharge against a squad of Chaos Marines that had breached a secondary barricade. Bolter fire tore through the air, chains' words clashed, and for a brief moment, the defenders regained the upper hand. Such victories were small, fleeting, and costly, yet they preserved hope in a situation that seemed hopeless. By the end of first night, Cadia had lost entire regiments. Trenches that had been fortified for decades lay empty, littered with the fallen. The wounded screamed for medics who could not reach them. For many, death came quietly. For others, it came in flames, warp fire, and psychic distortion. Despite the carnage, morale did not completely collapse. Soldiers who had survived bore scars, physical and mental, yet they continued to fight because surrender was impossible. Cadia had become more than a planet. It was a symbol, a standard of human courage against the galaxy's darkest forces. As the sun rose again, the scale of the Black Crusade's assault became clear. Abaddon's forces were probing Cadia's defenses, testing weaknesses and preparing for the next wave. The first night had been a warning, a demonstration of what the Black Legion could unleash. Alaric and the remaining commanders knew that the coming hours would demand even greater courage, tighter discipline, and sacrifices they had only begun to imagine. The second day of the 13th Black Crusade dawned over Cadia, but the planet's surface was unrecognizable. Fortresses smoked, crater plains stretched as far as the eye could see, and twisted remnants of Imperial war machines lay scattered across the fields. The air itself seemed thick with the residue of warp energy, each breath carrying a faint tang of ozone and ash. Cadia's defenders had survived the first night, but barely. Morale was tested. Exhaustion set into the muscles and minds of soldiers who had been fighting without pause. Every fortress, every barricade, every checkpoint had been a site of desperate struggle. Yet even in the darkest hours, the Imperium soldiers knew that retreat was not an option. Lord Castellan Ursarkar convened his command staff in the heart of the central citadel. Hololithic maps illuminated breaches across northern and eastern sectors. Imperial Guard regiments were scattered, some isolated, some holding vital choke points. Kale issued precise orders. Small coordinated counterattacks to reclaim lost positions where possible, disruption of enemy supply lines, and defense of key fortresses that would slow the Black Legion's advance. Sergeant Alaric, despite his exhaustion, was assigned to lead one such counterattack. Alongside a dozen elite Kazakhstan and surviving infantry, he prepared to retake a critical bridge that had been lost to chaos during the night. Every movement was calculated. Every soldier knew the price of failure. As Alaric's squad approached the bridge, warp fire streaked across the sky, detonating nearby ammo depots and sending tremors through the ground. The Black Legion had entrenched positions, fortified with demonic wards and warp-imbued armor. Alaric led the charge with bolter fire blazing, chainsword in hand. Explosions shook the bridge as Kazakhstan and Chaos Marines collided in brutal melee. The clash was ferocious, every second a fight for survival. Soldiers screamed, bolter rounds shredded armor, and the air vibrated with psychic energy from nearby sorcerers manipulating the battlefield. Despite the overwhelming numbers, Alaric's squad pushed forward, reclaiming half the bridge by sheer will. Their success was tactical, not strategic, a small but vital victory to slow the enemy advance and give civilians and retreating units time to reorganize. Every victory on Cadia came at a terrible cost. Several of Alaric's squad had fallen, their bodies torn or immolated in the chaos. Yet their sacrifice allowed dozens of civilians and injured soldiers to escape across the reclaimed bridge. This was the essence of Cadia. Bravery measured not by survival, but by the lives saved and the defiance of the impossible. In the grim darkness of war, these small victories were the lifeblood of human courage, a testament to the enduring spirit of the Imperium. Kale, observing the battlefield from the Citadel, understood the paradox of Cadia. Each tactical victory bought time, but could not halt the inexorable tide. Each act of heroism illuminated the human spirit, but also marked the cost the planet was paying in blood and fire. Across the plains, Black Legion forces adjusted to the Imperial counterattacks. Warp-twisted artillery struck where troops had regrouped. Demonic patrols flanked positions once considered secure. Chaos sorcery warped reality in unpredictable ways, shattering cohesion and morale in pockets of defenders. Despite these pressures, Cadia's troops held where they could, repaired what could be repaired, and waited for the next wave. Every soldier understood the stakes. The Black Crusade would not relent, and Cadia's defenses were showing the first signs of strain that might, in time, prove irreversible. By nightfall, the initial counterattacks had stabilized certain sectors. The bridge was held. A few key fortresses had been temporarily reinforced, and Alaric's squad had survived to fight another day. Yet the Black Legion was not defeated. Abaddon's strategy was patient, testing Cadia's strength, probing weaknesses, and waiting for the moment to strike decisively. The 13th Black Crusade had only just begun, and the true fury that would reshape Cadia was yet to come. Cadia's defenders were courageous, disciplined, and unyielding, but courage alone would not be enough. The morning light revealed the devastation in harsh clarity. Craters scarred the plains, walls of fortresses had collapsed, and the bodies of fallen soldiers lay scattered across sectors that had once been bastions of human resilience. The Black Legion had begun to strike with unrelenting precision. For the defenders of Cadia, the first major losses were no longer abstract. Entire regiments had been annihilated during the night's engagements. The northern gateways were compromised, and small pockets of Imperial Guard and Kazakhstan were isolated, fighting alone against warp-twisted foes. Abaddon's forces exploited every weakness with ruthless cunning. Warp storms tore through artillery emplacements. Chaos Marines overran command posts, and demonic entities appeared in places considered impregnable. In one northern sector, a fortress that had endured centuries of assaults crumbled under concentrated fire. Soldiers were forced to retreat through debris-choked corridors, carrying the wounded past walls that had been breached by chaos firepower. Explosions tore apart ammunition stores, and the air was thick with the acrid scent of burning promethium. Alaric, leading a contingent tasked with reinforcing the sector, witnessed the horror firsthand. He watched comrades fall to unseen sorcery and demon blade strikes. Despite the carnage, Alaric and his squad fought to the last defensible positions, buying critical minutes for survivors to escape. Lord Castellan Ursarkar faced decisions that weighed heavily upon him. Sending troops to retake lost fortresses risked annihilation. Leaving them meant losing strategic positions permanently. He chose the latter. Some fortresses were abandoned to buy time for reinforcements elsewhere. Each decision cost lives, yet Ursarkar knew that sacrifice was the only currency that could slow the advance of Abaddon's forces. Imperial commanders communicated in terse, clipped orders over Voxnet, their voices strained with exhaustion and despair. Every sector lost was a reminder that Cadia's strength, though legendary, was not infinite. Even in retreat, acts of bravery defined the human spirit. Alaric personally led a rearguard action at the shattered northern gateways, holding a choke point long enough for 2 platoons to withdraw safely. Bolter fire erupted in staccato bursts. Grenades detonated among chaos ranks, and Alaric's chains word flashed through the darkness. Medics ran between trenches, dragging injured soldiers to relative safety. Each act of courage, no matter how small, was a defiance of the inevitable, a statement that Cadia would not surrender without a fight, even as the world itself seemed to be collapsing under the might of chaos. By midday, the scale of Cadia's losses was staggering. Trenches once filled with disciplined soldiers were emptied, barricades reduced to rubble, and survivors struggled to maintain cohesion under constant assault. Ursarkar moved from command point to command point, coordinating reinforcements, issuing last-minute orders, and comforting those who had lost friends and comrades. Despite the chaos, morale had not completely broken. The soldiers knew that retreating to secondary positions was not surrender, but a tactical necessity. While the first breaches had cost dearly, they also revealed the adaptability and resilience of Cadia's defenders. Counterattacks were organized, traps set, and the surviving Castellan Guard held key points that slowed the Black Legion's advance. Yet the victory was only temporary. Abaddon observed from the shadows, calculating the next phase of his campaign. Every fortress breached, every casualty inflicted, every act of heroism and defiance only served to sharpen the Black Crusade's focus. Cadia was bleeding, but it was not yet defeated. Cadia no longer fought for victory. It fought for time. The skies burned with unnatural color as warp storms thickened, tearing open the heavens above the planet. Where once the Eye of Terror loomed as a distant scar, now its influence pressed directly against Cadia's atmosphere. Gravity fluctuated. Vox channels dissolved into screams and static. The world itself seemed to groan beneath the weight of chaos. The Black Legion advanced deeper. With the outer gateways compromised, Abaddon unleashed a second true phase of the invasion. Massive war engines, corrupted super-heavy tanks and demon-bound walkers, rolled across the plains, crushing trenches beneath iron treads. Orbital bombardment struck with terrifying accuracy, guided by traitor augurs and warp scryers. Entire Khazars vanished in fire. Sergeant Alaric's unit was redeployed again, this time into the inner defense zones, regions never meant to see open warfare. These were the heartlands of Cadia, where civilians had once lived under the illusion of safety. Now they burned. Alaric moved through streets reduced to rubble, fighting through ambushes of chaos cultists and traitorous Astartes. The war had come home. Discipline, Cadia's greatest strength, began to fracture, not through cowardice, but through exhaustion. Soldiers fought for days without rest. Ammunition ran low. Medici stations overflowed, then fell silent as generators failed. Vox commands conflicted as command nodes were destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Lord Castellan Ursarkar remained at the center of the storm, issuing orders that grew shorter, harsher, and more final. Entire regiments were reassigned to hold positions already deemed lost. Sacrifices calculated to delay the enemy's momentum. Every order Kale gave condemned thousands. Every second bought saved millions elsewhere. Demonic incursions intensified. Reality tore open in the streets, birthing entities that defied physical law. Guardsmen fired into shapes that bled shadow and flame. Faith became a weapon as important as bolters. Prayers whispered through clenched teeth as soldiers held their ground against creatures born of nightmare. Alaric witnessed a Kazakan squad stand firm against a greater demon long enough to detonate a Prometheum cache beneath it. They did not survive. The demon did, but it was slowed. That was enough. In the ruins of collapsed administrative tower, Alaric led a final defense line for over 6 hours. Wave after wave of chaos forces broke against barricades improvised from wreckage and corpses. When ammunition ran dry, they fought with blades. When blades shattered, they fought with bare hands. When there was nothing left to fight with, they stood. By the time relief arrived, fewer than half remained, but the advance had stalled. A sector lived another hour because they refused to break. This was how Cadia endured. From the command decks of his flagship, Abaddon observed with cold satisfaction. Cadia fought exactly as he expected, with stubborn, glorious resistance. Every act of heroism fed the slaughter. Every stand weakened the Imperium's ability to respond elsewhere. This was not a war of annihilation. It was a war of attrition, and chaos had all the time in the galaxy. The next phase would not test Cadia's defenses. It would break them. As night fell again, Cadia burned brighter than the stars above it. Fire spread unchecked. Warp lightning carved the sky into jagged scars. Alaric leaned against a shattered wall, blood freezing on his armor, listening to the distant thunder of guns that would not stop. He knew the truth now. Cadia would not be saved, but it would be remembered. The siege reached its final shape. What remained of Cadia's defenses were no longer lines on a strategic map, but islands of resistance surrounded by fire, ruin, and the endless advance of chaos. The sky itself had become a weapon, warp storms rolling overhead, turning daylight into a sickly twilight that never fully lifted. The planet was dying. The inner Khazars, ancient fortresses never meant to fall, now stood under constant bombardment. Their walls, layered with centuries of reinforcement, cracked beneath sustained orbital fire. Void shields failed one by one, collapsing in bursts of light that marked the end of entire sectors. Lord Castellan Kale relocated command to a subterranean bastion beneath the capital. Vox reports arrived slower now, often cut short by screams or sudden silence. Entire regiments vanished between transmissions. There were no reserves left, only survivors. Sergeant Alaric fought continuously, moving from one collapsing defense point to the next. Streets became killing grounds. Buildings were reduced to skeletal frames through which tracer fire and warp lightning tore indiscriminately. Chaos-based Marines advanced relentlessly, supported by cultist hordes and demonic engines. There was no finesse now, only pressure, crushing and unyielding. Alaric's squad dwindled with every hour. Names he had shouted in battle for years now belonged to the dead. Still, those who remained did not retreat. They could not. A critical breach tore open the western defense sector. Demonic titans strode through the ruins, their footsteps cracking the bedrock itself. Imperial artillery fired until barrels melted, then fell silent. Kale issued the order no Cadian commander ever believed they would give. Fall back, not to regroup, but to die with purpose. Every remaining unit was ordered to delay the enemy for as long as possible. Evacuation routes were prioritized for civilians, data vaults, and relics of Cadia's long defiance. Cadia was being dismantled piece by piece, not conquered but erased. Alaric volunteered for a holding action near the shattered gateways, the symbolic heart of Cadia's resistance. His remaining soldiers took position among broken walls and burning wreckage. They knew none would leave. Chaos forces surged forward in overwhelming numbers. Bolters thundered. Grenades detonated. When ammunition ran out, blades rose. When blades broke, fists clenched. Alaric was wounded early. A shard of corrupted metal lodged in his side. He fought on, driven not by hope of survival, but by the knowledge that every second mattered. Behind them, evacuation ships lifted off. Ahead of them, hell advanced. Abaddon had waited long enough. With Cadia bleeding and its defenders locked in endless last stands, he issued the final command. Ancient weapons long hidden within his fleet aligned toward the planet's surface. This was not conquest. This was judgment. The sky screamed. Energy beyond comprehension struck Cadia's crust. The ground convulsed. Continental plates fractured. Entire regions collapsed into magma-filled chasms. Cadia did not explode. It broke. Fortresses slid into the planet's depths. Cities vanished in seconds. The gateways, once the Imperium's greatest bulwark, fell into fire and shadow. Alaric felt the ground give way beneath him. As the world tore itself apart, he stood. There were no final words broadcast, no victory declared, only silence, spreading outward as Cadia's defenses finally ceased firing. The planet that stood for millennia against chaos was gone, but its defiance burned brighter than ever. Cadia was gone. Where once stood a world of fortress cities and unbroken resolve, there now drifted a field of shattered continents, burning debris, and expanding clouds of dust and atmosphere. The planet had not simply been destroyed, it had been unmade, its death violent enough to echo through real space and the Imperium alike. For a brief, terrible moment, the war fell silent. The destruction of Cadia sent a psychic tremor through the warp. Astropaths screamed as their minds were overwhelmed. Navigators clawed at their third eyes, blinded by visions of rupture and endless darkness. The ancient pylons, devices older than the Imperium itself, failed. With their collapse came catastrophe. The Cadian Gate, once the narrow throat through which chaos had been forced to pass, widened into a yawning wound. Warp storms expanded outward, tearing at the fabric of reality. What had been contained for 10,000 years was now unbound. The cicatrix maledictum was born. Across the galaxy, Imperial worlds felt the consequences within hours. Astropathic messages dissolved into static. Fleets vanished mid-translation. Entire sectors were cut off, isolated by raging warp tides that made travel impossible. The Imperium of man, already stretched thin by endless war, was split in two. On one side stood the light of the Astronomicon, still burning over Terra. On the other lay Imperium Nihilus, a realm cast into near-total darkness, where the Emperor's light was distant, distorted, or absent altogether. Cadia's fall had not ended a war. It had begun a new age of suffering. Those who escaped Cadia carried more than physical wounds. Cadian regiments were scattered across the stars, refugees in uniform. They fought on other worlds now, beneath unfamiliar skies, carrying banners that no longer had a home to return to. Yet their discipline did not falter. They drilled harder. They fought longer. They refused surrender with a stubbornness that bordered on the inhuman. Cadia stands, they said, not as a statement of fact, but as an oath. As long as one Cadian lived, the planet had not truly fallen. From the bridge of his flagship, Abaddon watched the debris field spread. He had achieved what no war master before him had managed. Cadia was destroyed. The gate was broken. The galaxy burned. And yet, the Imperium still lived. This was not the clean annihilation he had envisioned. Humanity endured, fractured but unbowed. The long war was far from over. Abaddon turned his gaze outward, already planning the next phase of destruction. Victory, to him, was not an ending. It was momentum. With the gate shattered, chaos poured into real space along 1,000 new paths. Demonic incursions erupted on worlds once thought safe. Black Crusade fleets scattered across Imperial space, striking where defenses were weakest. At the same time, Xeno's empire sensed opportunity. Orcs surged into newly isolated systems. Tyrannid tendrils adjusted course. Necron dynasties stirred, calculating futures in which humanity's dominance waned. Cadia's fall had destabilized the balance of the galaxy. Every faction moved. Every war intensified. On countless worlds, memorials were raised in Cadia's name, not because the planet had been perfect, but because it had endured. For 10,000 years, it had stood as a shield, absorbing blows meant for the heart of the Imperium. Its people had known only vigilance, only preparation, only war. They had never expected peace, only purpose. That purpose had been fulfilled. The Imperium did not forget Cadia. Its tactics were studied, its culture replicated. New fortress worlds were reinforced in its image, though none would ever truly replace it. Cadia had not been a miracle. It had been a warning, a reminder that survival in this galaxy was never guaranteed, only delayed by sacrifice. As the galaxy reeled, there was a pause, brief and fragile, before the next storms of war gathered. In that silence, the memory of Cadia lingered, not as a world, but as an idea. Cadia was gone, yet it endured, not in stone or steel, for both had crumbled beneath Abaddon's wrath, not in territory, for the gate was shattered and the planet itself sundered. Cadia lived in memory, in courage, and in the indomitable spirit of those who had carried its banners into the void. Every survivor of the 13th Black Crusade bore its legacy. Every officer, every soldier, every Kazakan who had fought and fallen had etched its defiance into the annals of the Imperium. The galaxy had witnessed the planet's destruction, but it had also witnessed its heroism. The toll was immense. Hundreds of thousands dead, fortresses flattened, regiments scattered across the stars, broken in body, but not in spirit. Yet even in these staggering losses, there was clarity. Cadia had not fallen through weakness, but through the overwhelming will of chaos. It had resisted, bought time, and delayed the inevitable in ways that would echo for generations. The Imperium learned harsh lessons, vigilance to falter, even on the strongest worlds. Preparation alone could not stop the long war. Sacrifice, courage, and unyielding discipline were all that stood between survival and annihilation. In the aftermath, survivors carried Cadia's story across the galaxy. They trained new regiments, fortified new worlds, and passed down lessons that could mean life or death in the next conflict. Cadia's name became more than a planet. It became a symbol of defiance, of discipline, of unwavering duty in a galaxy that offered none of those gifts freely. Even worlds far from the eye of Terra whispered its legacy. From Terra to distant outposts in the segmentum obscurus, the tale of Cadia inspired, warned, and commanded respect. For every planet that fell, another would rise. For every hero who died, another would take up arms. The Black Crusade did not end with Cadia. It surged forward, fueled by vengeance and ambition. Yet the memory of Cadia, the courage of its soldiers, and the sacrifices made in fire and shadow endured. In every stand against chaos, in every battle fought under impossible odds, there was a trace of Cadia, a reminder that even in loss, the human spirit could shine brighter than the eye of Terra itself. The galaxy may be vast, it may be indifferent, it may be cruel beyond comprehension. Yet within that darkness, even worlds that are destroyed continue to shape the future. Cadia had fallen, but it had left a mark that no amount of fire or warp could erase. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Yet even in its ashes, courage endures, and every soul must carve its legacy in fire and steel.